In today's video, we're going to be talking all about wild plums. But before we get into it, I just want to apologize in advance for the cicadas. They are unfortunately very noisy today, and there's nothing I can do about that, so it is annoying, but it is what it is. We just have to put up with it today. Wild plums are native to North America, and they can be found growing in a wide range of areas, including along riverbanks, along roadsides, and in big open fields. Although they're very adaptive to their environments, they do thrive in sunny areas, so you're not going to likely find them growing in dense forests and such. They really do like those big open areas that are full of sunlight. Wild plums grow on trees or shrubs that are typically on the small side. The bark in younger trees is smooth, can be reddish brown or dark gray in appearance, and they have short, small, white or tan colored horizontal lines known as lenticels. Lenticels are just pores on trees, which help trees to breathe. The bark is not consistent with color or texture, but it changes in appearance as the tree ages. Hey, enough. No. They have serrated leaves, which means that the edges of the leaves are saw-like in appearance. In early spring, the tree produces beautiful white flowers. It then produces fruit, which become fully ripened when they are a nice red color and they become soft to the touch. The color of wild plums do vary on which specific species of wild plum that you have. So some wild plums turn yellow, some turn red, and some turn a mixture of yellow and red. The plums are usually also ready to harvest around mid to late August. A key identifying feature for wild plums is this single, slight indentation that goes across the fruit. Wild plums also have one single pit inside, and the flesh is going to be yellow or orange in color. They taste very similar to the plums that you'd buy at the grocery store, having a very tart skin, but a very deliciously sweet and juicy flesh. You can see that this one is a little bit underripe, and that's totally fine. If you've picked them too soon and they're not quite ripe enough, all you have to do is put them in a paper bag and leave them on your counter. They will eventually turn to peak ripeness. In my opinion, wild plums don't really have any toxic lookalikes. However, if you do a little bit of research, you are going to come across some articles and such stating that the Bradford pear is a toxic lookalike, as well as a variety of different berries. In my personal opinion, I don't think that the fruits look anything like wild plums. The trees and shrubs themselves might look very similar in the early stages, but the actual fruit, in my opinion, they do not look like wild plums. But this is just my personal opinion, so regardless of what I think about toxic lookalikes and wild plums, you want to make sure that you always do your due diligence, do lots of research before you consume any wild edibles. You want to be 100% positive that you know what you're eating before you eat it, and if you have any doubt at all, you don't touch it. I began by washing and measuring out the wild plums that I harvested. These plums are at perfect ripeness, being a gorgeous red color and are soft to the touch. This next part is very tedious and gets very messy. I cut each plum in half in order to remove the inner pit. I'm also going to be removing most of the skins. I'm going to be placing the pits and the skins in a separate jar, and I'm going to set those aside and use them in a different recipe. The fruits get very slippery when you're cutting into them, so you need to be very careful using the knife. I'm going to be leaving some of the skin in while I'm cooking my jam for additional color and flavor. And removing the skin is actually a completely optional step. You don't have to do this, and I don't always remove the skin. The only reason why I'm removing the skin today is because I'm going to be using them in a separate recipe. If I wasn't making the additional recipe, I would just leave the skin on. I wouldn't even bother removing it. And in case you're curious, this is what the wild plum pit looks like, and the pit contains the seed. After all that work, this is what 3 cups of plums looks like once it's processed. I'm placing the pits and the skins in a separate jar, which I'm going to keep off to the side and use in a different recipe, which will be featured in a future video, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. Jam recipes are usually very simple, and they usually only use a couple of ingredients. The ratios that I usually stick to when I'm making jam is a half a cup of sugar for every 1 cup of fruit, and a half a tablespoon of lemon juice for every 1 cup of fruit. The one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're cooking with wild plums is that the skin on wild plums is extremely tart. So depending on how sweet you like your jam, you might want to consider using a little bit more sugar than normal if you want to counteract that tartness. You also might be wondering why I'm using lemon juice when the skin is already so tart to begin with. The lemon juice serves an important purpose, and there's a little bit of science behind it. Fruits contain a natural component called pectin. And when pectin and lemon juice interact with each other, a chemical reaction occurs that allows the pectin to gel, which is super important when you're making jam. If you don't have that gelling process, you're basically making syrup. We're adding all of our ingredients to a pot. We're going to stir until everything is well incorporated, and we're going to begin breaking down the plums over medium-high heat, stirring frequently. I'm mashing the fruit up a little bit while it cooks down to help release some of the flesh from the skin. After about 10 minutes, we're going to add the mixture to a blender, and we're going to blend until the skins are well broken down into the mixture. After it's all blended up, the mixture goes back on the stove to continue cooking. You're going to cook your mixture until it's reached its gel setting point. If you have a candy thermometer, this is 220 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a candy thermometer, there are different methods you can use to try and guess. My favorite way is to use the plate method. To do this, you just place a plate in the freezer and take it out when you want to test your jam. Place a small dab of jam on the cold plate and put that plate back in the freezer for a couple of minutes. After a couple of minutes, remove the jam from the freezer and poke it with your finger to see where it's at. If it's a gel-like consistency and you're happy with it, then your jam is ready and you can move on to the next step. If it's not quite there yet, just continue the process and check on it every couple of minutes. Be forewarned that it doesn't take very long for jam to reach this point, so be careful not to overcook it. And just a quick safety tip, if you are going to use the plate method, I don't recommend using glass, only because if you take a cold plate straight out of the freezer and you put something scalding hot on it, there's always the potential for the glass to crack. So I recommend using anything but glass. The next step is to pour the jam mixture into some sterilized jars, and we're going to be leaving about a 1/4 inch of headspace for canning. Headspace is the distance from the rim of the jar to the jam mixture. So in this case, we only want about a 1/4 inch of space to be remaining at the top of the jar. As always, the golden rules of canning are as follows. Make sure you use a tool to debubble your jar. We do this to make sure that any trapped air rises to the surface of the jar. Next, you want to make sure that you clean the rim of the jar with a clean cloth and some vinegar. This makes sure that the rim is extra clean, so there's a less potential for you to have any issues with your jar not sealing. And lastly, when you screw on your lid, make sure it's only fingertip tight. You really want to make sure that you do not over-tighten your lid, otherwise air won't be able to escape during the heating process. I have 1 jar left of wild plum jam from last season, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to show you the color difference. The reason why the 2024 jar is a deeper purple than this season's jar is because in 2024 I kept all the skins on. The skin is what gives it that beautiful rich color. You can place the jars in either a steam canner or a water bath canner, and you're going to process for 10 minutes. Once the jars are done processing, you're going to place them on a towel on the counter for the next 24 hours before storing. It tastes amazing on these brie and rosemary grilled cheese sandwiches, and also makes a great addition as a cheese topping for your charcuterie boards or your grazing tables.